What would you do if someone tried to steal your sanctuary? Ethan Carter thought he had everything under control. A peaceful life, a private pool, and the freedom to enjoy it. But when the HOA president, Karen Miller, declared his pool community property, Ethan's quiet retreat was shattered. Now, he's ready to make them regret pushing him too far. What starts as a simple act of revenge soon spirals into something far more dangerous. What happens when one man's fight for control turns into a nightmare for everyone around him? Brace yourself for the twisted showdown that will leave you questioning. How far is too far? Ethan Carter had always dreamed of a quiet life, a pidont sanctuary away from the chaos of the world. At 43, he had found just that in his suburban home. The spacious backyard, the serene garden, and most importantly, his private pool. It was more than just a pool. It was his escape. The one place where he could unwind after long, draining workdays. For years, this oasis had been untouched, a space that belonged entirely to him, or so he thought. One ordinary Thursday morning, Ethan's peaceful world was shattered. A plain white envelope from the Homeowners Association slipped into his mailbox, the bold HOA seal staring back at him. He tore it open, his heart sinking as his eyes scanned the words. His pool, the retreat he had lovingly maintained for years, was no longer his own. The HOA declared it a shared community amenity, a place for all the residents to enjoy, with scheduled swim hours and an appointed maintenance committee. The letter went on to threaten fines and even legal action if he refused to comply. The blood drained from his face as a surge of disbelief flooded through him. His private property, his sanctuary, was being stolen away by the HOA. He stared at the letter, his mind racing. The anger, the betrayal. How dare they take what he had worked so hard for? The sense of violation grew, gnawing at him like a slow-burning fire. Ethan was a calm, composed man by nature, but this was different. This wasn't just about a pool. This was about principle, about standing up for what was his. The more he thought about it, the more determined he became. He couldn't let Karen Miller, the HOA president, and her enforcers win. He would find a way to reclaim control, even if it meant taking matters into his own hands. It was time to act, and he had no intention of letting them walk all over him. Ethan stormed into the HOA office, the crumpled letter clenched tightly in his fist. His chest tightened as anger coursed through him. The thought of Karen Miller, with her smug smile and unrelenting grip on the HOA, taking away the one place that had become his refuge, his pool, was enough to make his blood boil. This was no longer just about a pool. It was about principle, about standing up to someone who thought she could control everything in his life. Karen was sitting behind her desk, tapping away on her computer, the picture of calm and indifference. She didn't even look up when Ethan slammed the letter onto her desk. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice sugary sweet, but with that unmistakable edge of superiority. "I assume you've read the notice?" His anger flared. "You can't just take my pool," Ethan spat, his voice low but firm. "It's mine. I paid for it. I take care of it. You have no right to claim it." Karen barely flinched. "Oh, Ethan," she sighed dramatically. "It's not about rights. It's about community. The HOA has decided your pool is an asset to all of us. It's only fair that we all have access to it." Ethan's blood ran cold. Fair? How was this fair? He had invested his time, his money, and his effort into making that pool a sanctuary for himself. He had never asked anyone for help. His hands clenched into fists, and his heart pounded in his chest. "You're making a mistake." "Karen," he said, his voice steady now, but with a chill that made the words cut deep. "You think you can control everything, but I'm done letting you push me around." The realization hit him like a jolt. This wasn't just about the pool anymore. This was about power, his choices, and he was going to make sure Karen felt the full force of it. Ethan spent the following days in a state of simmering frustration, every new fine from the HOA and every trespassing neighbor adding fuel to the fire. The more he thought about Karen Miller and her outrageous overreach, the more the feeling of betrayal gnawed at him. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It was about his rights, his sense of control over his life. She thought she could bully him, force him into submission, but Ethan was done being passive. He had always prided himself on keeping a level head. But the HOA's relentless pressure was slowly pushing him over the edge. The first few fines had been a nuisance, but now they were a symbol of his helplessness. Frustration turned to determination, and Ethan found himself thinking of ways to take back control, ways that were anything but ordinary. One evening, after hours of pacing the house, an idea struck him. It was so outrageous, so absurd, that it almost made him laugh. He could do something completely unexpected, something that would make the HOA regret ever trying to push him around. He wasn't just going to sit back anymore. He was going to make a statement, one that would get Karen's attention in a way she'd never forget. He started researching, diving deep into the world of exotic creatures. The more he read, the more the idea took hold. Piranhas. The very thought of them, sharp teeth, lightning speed, sent a thrill through him. He could practically see Karen and her enforcers scrambling, terrified as they realized what he had done. And the best part? It was legal. It was genius. Ethan spent hours combing through websites until he found a supplier, Viktor Dragunov, an expert in rare and dangerous animals. The price was steep, but Ethan didn't care. He placed the order, 50,000 red-bellied piranhas, and as he clicked the confirmation button, a twisted sense of satisfaction washed over him. It was time to make Karen and the HOA pay. The days leading up to the delivery felt like an eternity. Ethan Carter's mind was consumed with the thought of the piranhas. Every moment spent in his backyard, checking the security cameras, adjusting the underwater lights, and tweaking the water's color, only built his anticipation further. The pool, once a peaceful retreat, was now a weapon in his war against Karen Miller and the HOA. He spent late nights going over the details, ensuring everything would go according to plan. The piranhas, 50,000 of them, would arrive the next morning. The thought made Ethan's heart race with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had gone to extraordinary lengths, but would it be enough? Was he really ready to unleash something that could go horribly wrong? His mind flashed to Karen, her smug face, and her constant, oppressive control over the neighborhood. The more he thought about it, the more determined he became to make her regret underestimating him. In the dead of night, he checked everything once more. The hidden underwater lights, the fake piranhas scattered around the edges to create the perfect illusion, and the dark green hue of the water that now looked sinister. He could almost see Karen walking into his backyard, expecting to take over his space, only to be faced with the chaos he had prepared. Ethan's pulse quickened. He could almost hear the shrieks as the HOA members scrambled to escape, panicked and terrified. As the morning sun crept through the windows, Ethan stood by the front door, waiting for the delivery. His stomach twisted with a mix of anticipation and exhilaration. When the van finally pulled up, Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The piranhas were here. This wasn't just revenge. It was his final act of reclaiming control. He wasn't going to let Karen or anyone else take what was his ever again. The day of the piranha delivery arrived, and Ethan Carter stood at the edge of his backyard, his heart racing. The van had just pulled into the driveway, and as the driver unloaded the massive containers, Ethan's excitement mixed with a knot of nervousness in his stomach. Was this really happening? Could he go through with it? The containers, heavy and sealed, were positioned around the pool. The water, now a dark green with the eerie glow from the underwater lights, looked like something out of a nightmare. Ethan's pulse quickened as he checked the security cameras once again, ensuring everything was perfect. This was it. His plan had taken shape over days of meticulous preparation, but now that it was real, he felt the weight of what he was about to do. As the piranhas were finally released into the pool, their sleek bodies cut through the murky water. The sight was mesmerizing and terrifying at once. Exhilaration surged through Ethan. He had spent weeks making sure this moment would come to pass, and now, standing there, watching the piranhas swim in his pool, He felt a strange sense of satisfaction. But even as the adrenaline surged, a nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. Was this going too far? He had planned for revenge, for a spectacle that would rattle Karen Miller and the HOA, but now, standing there, the finality of it struck him. He couldn't back out now. He had come too far. A faint rustling came from the other side of the fence, and for a second, Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. Had someone seen him? But no, the rustling stopped, and the moment passed. He looked back at the pool, his mind made up. This was about more than revenge. It was about reclaiming control over his life, about showing Karen and the HOA that there were consequences to messing with him. Karen Miller stepped into Ethan Carter's backyard, her heels clicking on the pavement, as she surveyed the space with her usual air of authority. She was the queen of this neighborhood, or at least she liked to think so. Ethan had always been a quiet, compliant neighbor, but today, as she eyed the pool she believed was now hers to control, something felt different. There was an eerie stillness in the air, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Her gaze shifted to the water, calm and inviting. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but then she saw it. An unmistakable flicker beneath the surface, a flash of red. Another one, faster this time. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she took an instinctive step back. Ethan stood by, arms crossed, a slight, knowing smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Is something wrong, Karen?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost too calm. The realization hit her like a wave. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice shaking. She took another step back as the piranhas began to emerge from the depths, their sleek bodies darting across the water with predatory speed. The neighbors, who had been chatting just moments before, now began to shriek and scatter, some bolting for the fence, others frozen in fear. Karen's face turned pale as she backed away further. "You can't do this," she screamed, but the words barely left her mouth before she was overtaken by panic. Ethan stood tall, watching the chaos unfold. The sight of Karen, once so sure of herself, now scrambling and shouting, filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction. The moment of revenge he had carefully planned was finally here. Despite the rush of triumph, a small part of him wondered if he had gone too far. But as the neighbors continued to flee in terror, he knew this moment had marked the end of Karen's reign. She had pushed him too far. Now, it was his turn to make the rules. The chaos erupted the moment Karen Miller stepped into Ethan Carter's backyard. At first, she was confident. After all, this was her territory. She had enforced her will on the neighborhood for years. But now, with every step she took closer to the pool, a sense of unease began to creep in. The water, once calm, now shimmered ominously under the midday sun. There was something wrong. Her eyes narrowed as she saw a flash of red beneath the surface, and then another. A ripple of movement spread across the pool, faster now, more distinct. It was unmistakable. The creatures were there. Panic seized her chest, but she fought to keep her composure. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Ethan stood just behind her, watching with a calm that contrasted sharply with her panic. His voice was low, almost amused. "Didn't you say this was your community pool, Karen?" The piranhas surged to the surface, their sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight. The once calm pool was now a scene of chaos, as more and more neighbors began to notice. Some screamed and bolted toward the gate. Others froze in place, too terrified to move. It was a nightmare that had only just begun. Karen backed away, her face pale as the full realization hit her. You can't do this," she shouted. But Ethan only watched her, his arms crossed in satisfaction. As the panic spread, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction washed over him, but a lingering feeling of unease crept in. This was what he had planned for, what he had been working toward. But seeing Karen so helpless, so powerless, gave him pause. Was this really worth it? The screams echoed in the backyard as the HOA members scrambled to escape. But Ethan stood firm. This was his moment, his victory. The reign of Karen Miller and the HOA was over. The chaos erupted with terrifying speed. Karen Miller, once so confident and sure of her control, was now stumbling back in panic, her voice cracking as she screamed at Ethan. The pool, once a tranquil oasis, was now a scene of horror. Piranhas, their sleek bodies glinting in the sunlight, surged through the water, darting toward the edges with vicious speed. The neighbors, once casually chatting, were now frantically scrambling in every direction, some tripping over each other in their desperate attempt to escape, while others stood frozen in shock. Ethan stood calmly by the poolside, arms crossed, a small, almost imperceptible smile curling at his lips. Satisfaction coursed through him as he watched Karen's world unravel. She had tried to take what was his, but now she was helpless. He had orchestrated this moment, and now it was unfolding just as he had planned. "You can't do this," Karen shouted, her voice trembling with fear. She backed away, but the piranhas continued to circle, their eyes gleaming in the water. For a split second, doubt crept into Ethan's mind. He had wanted revenge, but as the chaos spread, a wave of guilt washed over him. Was it worth it? Watching the panic in his neighbor's eyes, hearing their screams, he questioned if he had crossed a line. But before he could dwell on it, the realization settled in. He was no longer the powerless victim. He was in control. And Karen? She had finally met the consequences of her actions. Ethan's gaze shifted to the scrambling neighbors, their terror feeding into his sense of power. He had taken back what was rightfully his. The HOA would never be the same, and neither would Karen. As the last of the chaos died down, Ethan stood motionless, the weight of his victory settling over him. He had won, but was this victory truly worth the cost? The chaos unfolded faster than Ethan could have predicted. Karen Miller, once a force to be reckoned with, was now scrambling in sheer panic, her voice trembling as she shouted commands to no one in particular. The pool, once serene, had transformed into a terrifying scene. Thousands of piranhas swirled beneath the surface, their sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight as they glided through the water with deadly precision. Neighbors who had been chatting casually just moments ago were now running, some tripping over each other in their frenzied attempts to escape. Ethan stood at the edge of the pool, arms crossed, his expression calm and focused as he observed the pandemonium. A sense of vindication surged through him. This was his moment, the culmination of months of frustration and helplessness. He had taken control, and Karen, once the powerful HOA president, was now at his mercy. "You can't do this," Karen screamed, her voice filled with fear. She took a step back, her face pale with shock, but Ethan didn't move. He had no sympathy left for her. She had tried to take what was his, forcing him into a corner, and now she was paying the price. But even as Ethan stood victorious, something tugged at his conscience. The guilt hit him like a wave. Was this truly the right way to handle it? Watching the neighbors, hearing their screams, seeing Karen's complete breakdown, it wasn't as sweet as he had imagined. A brief flicker of doubt flashed through him. Was it worth it? But the doubt quickly faded as he saw Karen fall to her knees, helpless and broken. The power dynamic had shifted. Ethan had reclaimed his life, his peace. The HOA and Karen's reign was finished. The chaos erupted faster than Ethan had anticipated. Karen Miller, once the powerful HOA president, was now stumbling in panic. Her confident composure shattered as the piranhas surged beneath. The surface of the pool, their sharp teeth gleaming in the sunlight. Neighbors who had been casually chatting moments before now ran in every direction, screaming in terror. Some tripped over one another in their mad dash to escape, while others froze in shock. Ethan stood motionless at the edge of the pool, arms crossed, observing the chaos unfold with an unsettling calmness. Satisfaction surged through him, but a hint of doubt lingered in his mind. He had carefully planned this moment, designed to break Karen's hold over him. Now that it was happening, the vindication he had hoped for didn't feel as sweet as he had imagined. "You can't do this," Karen cried, her voice trembling. She took another step back, eyes wide with fear. But Ethan didn't move. She had tried to control his life, take away his peace, and now she was facing the consequences. For a moment, Ethan's resolve faltered. The screams, the frantic movement of the crowd. It wasn't the triumph he had envisioned. Guilt crept in, mingling with his feelings of victory. Was this really worth it? Seeing Karen reduced to a terrified mess, hearing the panic spread across the yard, Ethan questioned whether this extreme measure had been necessary. But as the chaos continued, his hesitation dissolved. He had done what he needed to do. The HOA's reign and Karen's authority were finished. As Karen scrambled to escape, Ethan stood firm. His plan had worked. But now he knew that no one, not even Karen, would ever take what was his again. The HOA was no more, but the price of this victory weighed heavily on him. The chaos exploded suddenly, shattering the tense silence of Ethan Carter's backyard. Karen Miller, the once feared HOA president, was now backing away, her face drained of color. The pool, once tranquil, had transformed into a terrifying scene. Thousands of piranhas moved with ruthless precision beneath the surface, their sharp teeth glistening in the sunlight. Ethan stood motionless at the edge, his arms crossed, watching the nightmare unfold with unsettling calmness. Neighbors, once relaxed and laughing, were now scrambling in all directions, screaming in terror. Some tripped over each other as they tried to flee, while others froze, paralyzed by the horror before them. Ethan's heart raced, not with fear, but with a deep sense of vindication. This was the moment he had worked for, the plan that would end Karen's reign over him. "You can't do this." Karen's voice cracked, her composure completely shattered. She stumbled backward, but the piranhas continued their relentless pursuit. Ethan didn't flinch. She had tried to control his life, strip away his peace. Now the price of her arrogance was unfolding before her eyes. For a fleeting moment, Ethan's sense of vindication was overshadowed by a sudden surge of guilt. The terror in the yard, the panic in the air. Was this what he really wanted? The fear he had sought to instill was spreading far beyond. Karen. The satisfaction he had, envisioned, felt hollow as he watched the chaos around him. Karen fell to her knees, desperate and defeated. Ethan's mind raced, torn between the triumph of his actions and the heavy weight of their consequences. But in that moment, it became clear. He had reclaimed his life, his peace. The HOA was over. Karen's power was broken. Yet as the dust settled, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if the victory had come at too great a cost. The chaos erupted in an instant. Karen Miller, once the unwavering and powerful HOA president, was now paralyzed by fear. Her eyes widened as she saw the piranhas moving beneath the surface of the pool, their sharp teeth flashing in the sunlight. The pool, once a peaceful sanctuary for Ethan Carter, had transformed into a nightmare. The sharp scent of panic filled the air as neighbors scrambled to escape, some tripping over each other in their haste to reach safety. Ethan stood by the poolside, arms crossed, observing the chaos unfold. His heart raced not with fear, but with an overwhelming sense of vindication. The moment he had waited for had finally arrived. This was his chance to reclaim control over his life, to take back what had been unjustly taken from him. Karen's shrill voice cut through the chaos. "You can't do this," she screamed, but Ethan didn't flinch. He had been forced to endure her power for far too long. Now he was finally the one in control. As Karen stumbled backward, her confidence shattered. Ethan felt a surge of satisfaction. She had pushed him to the brink, and now it was her turn to pay. But as the terror spread across the yard, something unexpected crept into Ethan's chest. A flicker of guilt. The sight of Karen, once so powerful, now a broken shell of herself, was not the victory he had imagined. The fear in her eyes and the panic that had engulfed. The neighbors made him question his actions. Was this really justice, or had he gone too far? Despite the lingering doubt, Ethan's resolve strengthened. The HOA was finished, and Karen's reign of control had crumbled. But as the last of the chaos died down, he couldn't shake the thought. Was this truly the cost of victory? The chaos in the backyard was deafening. Karen Miller, once the formidable HOA president, now stood frozen in fear. Her eyes darted around the pool, where thousands of piranhas swarmed, their sharp teeth flashing under the sunlight. The scene was far from what it had been moments ago. A peaceful oasis. Now it was a nightmare. Ethan Carter stood by the poolside, his arms crossed, watching the frenzy unfold. The vindication he had yearned for was finally his, but it came at a price. His neighbors, once laughing and enjoying their afternoon, were now running in every direction. Some stumbled over each other in their desperate escape, while others froze, paralyzed by the horror they had witnessed. Karen's voice broke through the chaos, high-pitched and desperate. "You can't do this!" She backed away, eyes wide with panic. Ethan didn't flinch. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. For years, she had taken everything from him, his peace, his privacy. Now she was paying the price. But as Ethan stood there, a flicker of guilt crept into his chest. Was this truly the justice he had wanted? Seeing Karen, once so powerful, reduced to a trembling, helpless figure wasn't as sweet as he had imagined. The fear in her eyes, the screams of the neighbors, it didn't feel like victory anymore. It felt like something darker. Karen stumbled backward, trying to flee, but the piranhas closed in, their movement relentless. Ethan's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about power. And yet, the cost of that power was becoming painfully clear. As Karen fell to her knees, Ethan realized something profound. The HOA was over. Karen's reign had crumbled. But at what cost? Ethan had reclaimed his life. But now he wondered if the victory had been worth the fear and destruction it had caused. The backyard erupted into chaos. Karen Miller, once a towering figure as the HOA president, stood paralyzed in fear, her eyes wide as she stared at the water. Below the surface, thousands of piranhas swirled, their sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight. The pool, once a peaceful sanctuary for Ethan Carter, had transformed into a deadly nightmare. His neighbors, who had been casually enjoying their day moments ago, were now sprinting in all directions. Some tripped, others froze in fear, paralyzed by the terror unfolding before them. Ethan stood motionless, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Karen. The vindication he had longed for was finally within his grasp. For so long, he had endured her control, her constant interference in his life. Now, she was the one who was helpless. The power had shifted. "You can't do this!" Karen's voice trembled, filled with desperation. Her once imposing presence was now reduced to a frightened woman, stumbling backward. Ethan didn't move. He had waited for this moment, for the chance to reclaim what had been taken from him. The piranhas had become a symbol of his revenge. But as the terror continued, something unexpected stirred within Ethan. A flicker of guilt. Watching Karen, once so confident and in control, now broken and vulnerable, made him question the cost of his actions. Was this truly the justice he had sought? The fear in her eyes, the screams of the neighbors, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like something darker. Karen fell to her knees, a victim of her own arrogance. Ethan's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. The HOA was no more. Her reign of power had crumbled. But was this the price of freedom? As the chaos subsided, he couldn't shake the feeling that this victory had come at too great a cost.